The sun was rising over the wide red plains of Ornos. 2 suns, actually. The planet had no real night. Only brief shadows moved across the dunes when one sun dipped and the other rose. Heat never stopped. The wind carried sand like tiny needles. Life here was not easy. Taren wiped sweat from his brow as he stepped out of his hauler. The metal of the cargo engine was hot under his hand. He opened the panel again and looked inside, hoping something had changed, but it hadn't. The engine was dead. The power crystal had burned out during the night. Without it, the hauler would not move. He had no extra. Traders never carried spare crystals. They were too expensive and usually too reliable to break. But this one had cracked without warning. Maybe the heat had done it. Maybe it was just old. Either way, it was over. Taran stood in silence and looked around. The red plains stretched as far as he could see. His map showed the nearest outpost was more than 100 kilometers away. He had food and water for a few days, but not much. He could not call for help. There were no satellites here. No signal. Only silence. He wasn't afraid. Not yet. He had faced worse. But this was not good. He sat down beside the hauler, pulled out a bottle of water, and took a small sip. He would need to save every drop. His cargo was still inside the trailer. Dried herbs, healing roots, and bottled oils from the far side of the planet. It had taken weeks to collect them. Buyers at the outpost were waiting. He couldn't leave it behind. Not after everything. The wind picked up again. Scent flew through the air, stinging his face. He pulled his scarf over his mouth and eyes. Then he heard it, a sound. Soft but real. Not wind, not metal. It was footsteps. Taran stood quickly and looked out toward the dunes. For a moment he saw nothing. Then a figure appeared on the ridge, moving slowly, steady, for dash leg. No, 2 legs now. It stood upright. It was a person, or something close. As the figure came closer, Taran saw more. It was a female, tall and lean, with fur the color of ash. Long ears rose from her head, and her eyes were wide and golden. Her hands were human-like, but her arms and legs moved with a different rhythm. She was not fully human, but she was not wild either. She stopped a few meters away and tilted her head. Taran raised a hand in greeting. He didn't speak. He wasn't sure what language she would know, but he smiled, trying to look peaceful. She looked at his hauler, then back at him. Her nose twitched. "You live here?" Taran asked, slowly and clearly. She blinked but didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer to the cart and ran her hand along its metal side. He watched her carefully. She was strong. Her back and shoulders showed the shape of muscle beneath the fur. She wasn't carrying any weapons, just a simple satchel across her chest. "My name is Taran," he said. Still, she said nothing, but she pointed at the broken engine, then to the path behind him, then touched her own chest. Taran understood. She had seen the smoke. She had followed his trail. "I broke down," he said. "The engine is dead. I can't fix it." She crouched near the hauler's rear tires and studied the weight of the cart. Then she stood and looked at him with clear purpose. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her language. But the look in her eyes was easy to understand. She wanted to help. "You know a place nearby?" Taran asked. She shook her head. "Can you pull it?" he asked, half joking. She nodded. Taran stared. "You're serious?" She stepped forward and bent down on all fours, testing the ground with her hands and feet. Then she grabbed a rope that hung from the cart and pulled it over her shoulder. Her body was built for movement. Her limbs worked like a creature made for running, climbing, surviving. She was not weak. Not at all. "No way," Taran whispered. He rushed over. "Wait, that's too much. You'll hurt yourself." She looked back and made a soft sound almost like a huff, like she was teasing him. Then she pulled again. The cart moved, just a little, but it moved. Taran watched, stunned. She pulled again, more steady now. The wheels turned, slow but smooth. Sand kicked up behind her paws. She turned and looked at him, then gestured for him to follow. "You're serious about this?" he said. She didn't answer. She only moved forward again. Taren stood there, unsure what to do. This wasn't normal. This wasn't expected. But the hall wasn't going to fix itself. And she seemed to know what she was doing. He picked up his pack, checked the water bottles, then walked beside the cart. The suns were rising higher now. Heat shimmered off the sand. Their journey had only just begun. And Taren knew one thing for sure. This strange alien girl who had said nothing, who came from nowhere, might be the only reason he would survive. The journey across the plains began with silence. Only the sound of wheels turning through sand and the soft rhythm of breathing filled the air. Taren walked beside the cart while the alien girl pulled it slowly on all fours. Her name was still and known. She had not spoken once, but her actions spoke clearly. The suns were hot above their heads. One cast sharp light, the other added a warm glow that never faded. Taren had wrapped a cloth around his head and neck, but the heat still burned through. He kept looking at the girl, wondering how she was not slowing down. She moved with control. Her body swayed with each step, using her arms and legs to balance the heavy weight. Her thick fur likely made the heat worse, yet she showed no signs of pain. Her breathing stayed calm. Her ears twitched now and then, listening to the wind or distant sounds. Taren admired her strength, but he worried. "You need to rest soon," he said. She didn't answer. He tried again, using hand signals. He tapped his wrist like a clock, then made a stop sign. She looked back and gave a short nod. After a few more steps, she guided the cart toward a rocky ledge. There, in the shadow of a tall stone, she stopped. Taren dropped his pack and sat down on a flat rock. His legs were tired, and sweat ran down his face. He handed a bottle of water toward her. She stared at it for a moment, then took it gently. She sniffed at first, then drank a few careful sips. Taren smiled. "Good, right? Cold water would be better, but we work with what we have." She sat back on her legs, resting with her arms in front. The way she moved was both wild and calm, like she was part animal, but also full of thought. Her eyes stayed sharp, watching the horizon. Taren reached into his bag and pulled out dried fruit. He offered her some. She sniffed it again, then slowly took a bite. Her nose twitched, but she kept eating. They sat like that for a while, not speaking, just sharing food and silence. The wind carried the scent of dry sand and faraway plants. A few small creatures moved in the distance, but nothing close. After some time, Taren spoke again. "You saved me today. I owe you my life." The girl tilted her head. Her ears perked up. "I wish I knew your name," he said. He pointed at himself. "Taren." Then he pointed at her. Lifting his eyebrows, she looked at his hand, then tapped her chest. "Velna," she said quietly. It was the first word she had spoken. Her voice was soft and clear. Taren smiled. "Velna, that's a strong name. Thank you." She nodded once, then looked away, as if the moment was over. They rested for a little longer. Then Velna stood and stretched. Her muscles moved smoothly under her fur. She walked to the cart and adjusted the ropes across her shoulders. Taren stood. "2. Let me help pull." She looked at him, then stepped aside for a moment. He picked up one of the front ropes and pulled. The cart moved a little, but the weight was more than he expected. After just a few meters, he stopped to breathe. Velna gave a short sound, something like a quiet laugh. "Not mean, just amused." "Yeah, I get it," Taren said. "You're better at this." She took the rope back and moved forward again, slow but steady. They continued across the plains. The land began to change slightly. The sand grew thinner, and patches of hard soil appeared. Strange plants with thick stems pushed up from the ground. Some looked like giant mushrooms. Others looked like short trees with flat tops. Velna walked around one of them, sniffed the bark, then pointed up. A small bird with glowing feathers sat on a branch. It chirped twice, then flew away. Taren watched her as she moved. There was something peaceful about the way she connected with the land. She didn't seem afraid of anything. She belonged here. By the time the suns began to lower in the sky, the air cooled slightly. Velna stopped near a large rock wall shaped like a hook. It offered some protection from the wind. She tapped the stone twice, then placed her satchel down. Terran understood. This would be their camp for the night. He set up his small tent near the wall and unrolled his mat. Velna didn't have a tent. She used a thick cloth and placed it over a low branch, forming a small shelter. Her movements were fast and careful, like she had done this many times before. As the sky turned orange and pink, Terran lit a small cooking unit and boiled water. He added dried soup mix and stirred slowly. The smell filled the air. Velna sat nearby, watching the flames with interest. He handed her a metal bowl. It's not fancy, but it fills the stomach. She tasted it, then nodded with approval. After they finished eating, Terran looked up at the stars beginning to appear. The night sky of Ornos was deep purple, full of distant light. No cities, no towers, just open space. He turned to Velna. Why did you help me? She looked at him for a long time. Then she spoke slowly, choosing each word with care. You were alone, she said, and you needed help. Terran nodded. But you didn't have to. Most would have walked away. Velna didn't answer right away. Then she said, we walk together. That is our way. Terran smiled. That's a good way. She looked up at the stars, then curled up beneath her cloth shelter. Her body made a tight circle, tail wrapped near her legs. Within moments, her breathing slowed. Terran lay down in his tent, thinking about her words. They walked together. Maybe humans had something to learn from that. Tomorrow, the journey would continue, but tonight, under the twin moons of Ornos, a strange new friendship had begun. The next morning came quietly. The suns had not yet reached full height, and the sky glowed soft orange. A cool breeze passed through the camp. Terran sat up inside his tent, rubbed his eyes, and stretched. His back was sore, but his mind was clear. He looked over at Velna. She was already awake. She crouched near the cart, checking the ropes, adjusting the wheels, and brushing off the sand that had settled during the night. She worked without sound, as if it were part of her daily rhythm. Terran stepped out and waved. Good morning. Velna looked up and gave a short nod. She pointed to the water container beside him, then to her mouth. He handed her the bottle. Of course, here. She drank slowly, then passed it back. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp as always. She glanced at the sky, then tapped her hand twice on the ground. Terran had seen this before. It was her way of saying, time to go. He packed up his small camp quickly and helped tie down the supplies. Then he walked to the front of the cart. Velna moved in front of him, taking her usual place. She bent forward, her hands gripping the ropes. But before she started, Terran raised a hand. Wait, he said. She turned her head and looked at him. Terran picked up one of the side ropes and tied it around his shoulder. Let me share the weight this time. Velna stared for a moment. Then, slowly, she gave a small nod. They began moving together, one step at a time. The wheels creaked softly as the cart rolled forward. The path ahead was rocky now. The land had changed. Sharp stones pushed up from the dirt, and thorny plants grew in groups along the sides. Terran could feel the weight of the cart pulling on his back. It was hard work, but he didn't stop. He looked over at Velna. Her pace was steady, her breath even. He wondered how many kilometers they still had to travel. The map on his handheld screen had died when the engine failed. He had only a rough idea now. Maybe 2 days left, maybe 3 dots still. They walked. Hours passed. The sun rose high. He pressed down like a heavy blanket. Terran's shirt stuck to his skin. His legs burned. His arms ached. But he didn't complain. Velna moved ahead and pointed toward a cluster of tall rocks. Terran saw what she saw. Shade. They guided the cart into the shadows and stopped. Terran dropped to the ground, chest rising and falling. We're doing it, he said. We're really doing it. Velna sat beside him. She pulled a strip of dry meat from her bag and chewed slowly. Terran reached for his own food, then held it out to her first. She took it with a quiet thank you in her eyes. After a short rest, Terran looked at the cart again. You know, we could build something better for tomorrow. Maybe longer ropes or a better harness. Velma raised an eyebrow. Taren stood and walked around the cart, thinking. He used spare straps from his bag to tie a cross pattern around the front frame. Then he connected to side ropes to make a loop over each shoulder. It wasn't perfect, but it looked more balanced now. He handed Velma one of the new straps. She tested it, pulling gently. Then she nodded again. For the next few hours, the new harness made the pulling easier. Taren and Velma worked together, step by step, as the land stretched onward. In the afternoon, clouds rolled in from the west. The wind picked up. A sharp cry echoed through the air. Velma stopped and raised her head. Her ears turned, searching. Taren looked around. What is it? She pointed toward the sky. There, above the horizon, several flying shapes appeared, dark and large. Wings spread wide. Taren frowned. Birds. Velma shook her head. The creatures flew in circles. Watching from above, Velma stepped forward and reached into the cart. She pulled out a small device, a round metal disc with a blue light. She placed it on the ground, pressed a button, and stepped back. A soft humming sound filled the air. Taren stared. What is that? Velma pointed to the sky, then drew a circle around them with her hand. Protection. He guessed. She nodded. The flying creatures circled a little longer, then flew off in another direction. The sound from the device slowly faded. Taren let out a breath. You came prepared. Velma placed the device back in the cart. Her eyes watched the sky for another minute. Then she turned and kept walking. They moved on. By evening, they found a flat area with soft ground. A few large stones formed a natural wall on one side. Velma inspected the area, sniffed the air, then gave a short signal. Safe. Taren set up camp again, this time with faster hands. The routine was becoming familiar. Velma made a small cooking fire from dry twigs and strange roots she had found earlier. The smell was strong but pleasant. As they sat near the warm fire, Taren looked at the stars above. You didn't have to help me, he said softly, but I'm glad you did. Velma looked at him. Her face was calm, but there was something kind in her expression. I saw your trail, she said, and your broken cart. It was heavy, but not impossible. Taren chuckled. Not impossible if you're stronger than a machine. Velma tilted her head, almost like a smile. Taren looked at the flames. Back home, we don't meet many people like you. Most just pass by. No one stops to help. But you did. You made a choice. Velma nodded. We believe in walking together, even with strangers. Taren smiled. Then I'll keep walking with you. They sat in silence again. But it was not empty. It was full of something growing. Trust. Respect. A quiet pact between two travelers from different worlds. Tomorrow would bring more steps. More heat. More distance. But tonight, under the dark sky and flickering firelight, they were not strangers anymore. Morning light spilled over the edge of the rocks. Taren opened his eyes slowly. His body was sore, but his spirit felt stronger. Every morning on Ornos began the same hot air, soft winds, and the sound of sand shifting under pressure. He sat up and looked around the small camp. Velma was already awake. She stood near a small plant, carefully gathering dark berries with her fingers. Her movements were slow and gentle, like she was respecting the land. Taren walked over. Are those safe to eat? Velma gave a short nod and handed him one. He looked at it, sniffed it, then placed it in his mouth. The taste was bitter at first, but then sweet. He nodded in approval. They ate a small breakfast together. No words, just the quiet comfort of a growing friendship. After packing up the cart and tightening the harness ropes, they began walking again. The land ahead looked flat, but something had changed. The wind had grown stronger. It kicked up dry sand that scratched their skin and eyes. Velma pulled a cloth over her nose and tightened the rope on her back. Taren did the same. They kept moving. Every few steps, the sand shifted under their boots and paws. The wheels of the cart dragged deeper into the ground, making it harder to pull. The dust filled the air until it was hard to see far ahead. Still, they pressed forward. Velma's legs moved with slow strength. Her shoulders bent forward as she carried most of the weight. Terran stayed close to her, pulling from the side. The heat mixed with dry wind made each step feel heavier than the last. After some time, Terran raised his voice. We should stop. For a bit, Velna didn't answer, but her breathing had grown louder. She kept walking. Velna. Terran said again, rest. She slowed down but did not stop. Only when they reached a large rock formation did she finally drop to one knee. Terran quickly unhooked the rope from her shoulders and helped her sit down. Her fur was covered in dust. Her ears twitched from the wind. She looked exhausted. He handed her water. She drank it slowly. Then she rested her head against the rock, closing her eyes. Terran sat beside her, wiping sweat from his forehead. We'll wait here until the wind settles. She nodded without speaking. The silence between them was deep, but not cold. It was the silence of people who trusted each other enough not to fill every moment with words. As they rested, the sandstorm grew stronger. Dust swirled around them like smoke. Terran pulled out a thin blanket and held it up as a barrier. Velna helped him secure it with stones, creating a small wall to block the worst of the wind. They sat behind the cover for nearly an hour. Terran used that time to check the supplies. They still had enough food for 2 more days, maybe 3 if they shared carefully. Water was low, but not yet dangerous. Velna sat with her eyes half closed, her body still. She wasn't asleep. She was listening. Suddenly, she raised her head and sniffed the air. Her ears perked up. Terran noticed the change in her expression. What is it? She didn't speak but pointed to the edge of the rock wall. Terran looked through the gap in the cover. At first, he saw nothing but dust, then movement, shadows. Several figures were moving through the storm. Velna stood slowly and placed herself between them. Cart and the path. Her body tensed, ready. She picked up a long stick from the cart and held it in both hands. Not to attack, but to protect. Terran stood beside her. The shadows came closer. As the storm cleared slightly, the figures took shape. They were chiral Velnas. Own kind, 3 of them, tall and strong, with dark fur and metal bracelets on their arms. One of them had bright yellow markings painted across his face. They stopped a few meters away. Velna stepped forward. She spoke in her language. Her voice was calm but firm. The chiral with the face paint spoke back. His tone was colder. Terran couldn't understand the words, but he understood the mood. These chiral did not look friendly. Velna pointed to the cart, then to Terran. Her stance was clear. She was defending him. The yellow-marked chiral stepped forward, looking at Terran with narrow eyes. He growled a short question. Terran held up his hands. I don't want trouble. The chiral said something again. He pointed at the cart, then at Velna. His voice was sharper now. Velna moved between them. She barked a short word and slammed the stick against the ground. The chiral stopped. Then, slowly, the leader stepped back. There was a pause. Then the other 2 followed, without a fight, without a word. The 3 chiral turned and walked back into the dust storm. Their shadows disappeared into the swirling sand. Terran exhaled slowly. That could have gone bad. Velna turned toward him. Her body was still tense, but her eyes were calm. They asked why I carry your cart. She said. Terran nodded. And what did you tell them? I said you walk beside me, she replied. He smiled. Thank you. She looked back at the path. They don't understand yet, but they will. The storm started to calm. The wind slowed. The dust settled. They rested a little longer, then returned to the cart. Velna tied the ropes back over her shoulders. Terran took his place beside her. Together, they pulled the cart through the fading dust, leaving behind the moment of tension, and stepping back into the journey. The land was still wide. The sun was still hot, but something had changed. Terran had seen it with his own eyes. Velna was not just strong. She was brave, and in that moment, he realized something else. She was no longer just helping him. They were helping each other. The storm had passed, but the wind had left behind deep marks in the land. The sand now formed soft hills that were harder to cross. The sun beat down as always, but the sky was clear and blue again. The long journey continued. Terran and Velna walked together. Their steps slow but steady. The cart moved behind them with soft creaks. Its wheels now showed signs of wear, but it still rolled forward. Terran had tied a new piece of cloth around his head to block the sun. He looked over at Velna. She still pulled the cart on all fours, her movements strong and sure. But he could see the effort in her shoulders. Her pace was not as fast as the first day, but it had not stopped. She was tired, but she kept going. The path ahead stretched across an open field. Thin trees grew on each side. The ground here was darker and firmer. Terran checked the empty sky, then glanced at the horizon. "I think the outpost is close," he said. "Maybe tomorrow or the day after." Velna didn't speak. She just nodded and kept walking. As they passed the trees, Terran noticed something strange. The wind was calm, yet the leaves ahead were moving, not from air, but from motion. He stopped and raised a hand. "Velna, wait." She looked up. Her ears turned toward the sound. She sniffed the air once, then twice. From between the trees, several shapes stepped out. They were chiral again, not like Velna. These were larger, older, and carried long sticks and short blades. Their fur was darker, their eyes sharper. They wore cloth bands on their arms and necklaces made from bones. There were 5 of them. Velna stood up slowly, her back straight. She held out one hand to signal peace. One of the chiral stepped forward. He was tall and broad, with a scar across his jaw. His eyes locked on Velna first, then moved to Terran. He said something in their language. His voice was deep and low. Taren didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning. The group did not look friendly. Velna spoke back. Her tone was calm but serious. The scarred one laughed. It was not a warm laugh. He stepped closer and pointed at Terran. Then at the cart. Taren whispered, "What does he want?" Velna turned to him. "He believes I have lowered myself. He says no chiral should pull a human's cart." Terran frowned. "You chose to help me." "He does not understand that," she replied. To him, strength is not for sharing. The scarred chiral stepped closer again. His tone grew louder. Velna moved between him and Terran. She spoke again. This time her voice was stronger. She stood tall, tail still, eyes focused. The other chiral began to circle around, forming a half ring. Terran felt a knot in his chest. He didn't want to fight. He reached into the cart slowly, pulling out a long wooden stick they had used to support the tent. Velna raised her hand. "No, not yet." She stepped forward and faced the scarred one. She dropped to all fours. Then slowly, she stood back up and pointed to the cart. Then she pointed at Terran. Finally, she tapped her chest and said one word. The other chiral paused. The scarred one tilted his head. Velna spoke again, short phrases, strong words. Terran didn't know what she said, but it carried weight. The wind grew still. The leader took one long look at Velna, then at Taren. And then he stepped back. The rest followed him. Not a word more. They melted back into the trees like shadows, quiet, watching, gone. Velna stood still, her hands by her side. Taren exhaled. That was close. Velna turned to him. "They will not bother us now." "What did you say to them?" he asked. "I told them the truth," she said. "That I chose to walk with you. That walking beside someone is not weakness." Terran looked down at the sand. "I didn't want you to get hurt because of me." Velna looked at him calmly. "You didn't cause this. They only fear what they do not understand." Terran nodded. Slowly, they rested under a tree for a short while. Velna took some dried roots from her pack and crushed them with a flat stone. She mixed them with water and handed half to Taren. He drank it, even though the taste was bitter. "What is this for?" "Energy," she said. "We still have far to go." As the sun moved lower in the sky, they began walking again. The land was quieter now. The wind was soft. Only the sound of their footsteps and the cart's wheels filled the space. After some time, Velna said, "You are strong." Terran laughed. "Me? I haven't done much. You're the one pulling the cart. You didn't run," she said. "You stayed." Terran looked at her. "You stayed too." Velna smiled for the first time. It was small, but real. They kept walking. Later that evening, they found a small water spring near a broken stone pillar. The water was clear and cool. They filled their bottles, washed the dust from their faces, and sat under the stars. Terran looked up. This sky, I've never seen anything like it. Velna nodded. My people believe the stars guide those who are lost. Terran looked at her. Are we lost? She looked at the stars too. No, not anymore. They rested in silence once. Again, but this time it was the silence of understanding. The silence of two souls who had crossed something more than just land. They had crossed fear. They had crossed doubt, and now they walked forward together. The next morning was cooler than usual. A thin mist moved across the land like soft breath over the earth. The sky was quiet. Even the wind seemed to rest. Taren stood near the cart, stretching his arms. His body felt sore, but his heart was light. The outpost was near. Velna had smelled the change in the air. She had said the scent of machines was growing stronger. That meant people. That meant safety. Velna walked over, her feet silent on the ground. She handed Terran a handful of small fruit she had found near the water spring. He smiled and took one. We're close, Terran said. Vel nodded. By nightfall, we will see the towers. Terran looked down at the cart. Its wheels were weak. One was slightly cracked. The ropes had frayed. The supplies inside were almost gone, but it had carried them this far. He turned to Velna. You've done more than I ever expected. Velna looked at him with calm eyes. We are not there yet. They shared a short meal and then prepared for the final part of the journey. Velna placed the harness over her shoulders. She bent forward and pulled the ropes tight. Terran stood beside her, holding one of the side ropes. Let's do this together, he said. They started moving again. The ground changed under their feet. The dry sand turned to packed dirt. Small signs of life began to appear. Broken pieces of metal half buried in the earth, stone markers left by travelers. A narrow path carved by many boots and wheels. They were entering trade lands. Terran kept his eyes on the horizon. He felt excitement growing in his chest. But he also noticed something else. Velna was slowing down. Her steps were still strong, but her breathing had changed. Her back shifted more with each pull. Her arms moved with effort. She had walked so far, pulled so much, given so much. Taren stopped walking. Velna looked at him, confused. You need to rest, he said. She shook her head. We are close. We keep moving. Terran stepped forward and gently took the harness from her shoulders. You've carried enough. Now it's my turn. Velna hesitated. You cannot pull it alone. Terran smiled. Maybe not well, but I'll try. She looked at him for a long moment, then stepped aside. She watched silently as Terran picked up the ropes, adjusted them around his shoulders, and began to walk. The cart moved, slower than before. The weight pulled hard against his back. Every step felt heavy. The sun was rising now. The heat returned, but he did not stop. Velna walked beside him. She watched him quietly, her body still tired, but her eyes proud. For the first time, the roles had shifted. Terran was not just a traveler. He was the one leading. He did not speak. He just breathed and walked, step by step. They passed a row of small stone towers. Each one had a different symbol. Velna touched one gently with her hand as they passed. These marked the last border, she said. We are near. Terran wiped the sweat from his face. That's good to hear. A few hours later, a shape appeared in the distance, a thin line on the horizon. Then it grew taller. Terran squinted. He could see the edges of metal walls, towers rising from the flat land, and antennas reaching into the sky. It was the outpost. Velna saw it too. She stood straight again. Her ears lifted, her eyes narrowed with focus. You see, she said. We made it. Terran smiled. Not yet, but soon. They kept moving. Traders passed by now and then. Some looked at them with surprise. A few stopped and stared. A human pulling a cart, a chiral walking beside him. It was not something they saw every day. No one said anything. But Terran saw the way they looked. Velna saw it too. She did not lower her head. She walked with quiet pride. Finally, they reached the gates of the outpost. A metal wall stood tall in front of them. Guards watched from towers. Machines hummed softly in the air. The smell of fuel and fresh water filled their noses. One of the guards stepped forward. Name and purpose. Taryn took a deep breath. Taryn, merchant. My engine broke. We walked. From the red plains. The guard's eyes widened. Walked. Taryn nodded. She helped me. Pulled the cart. The guard looked at Velna. His expression changed. First confusion. Then respect. He opened the gate. Come inside. You both deserve rest. They entered the outpost. Cool air touched their faces. Shade fell across their path. People moved around them, busy with trade and work. Taren guided the cart to a rest zone. He stopped it near a wall and sat down on the ground. Breathing deeply, Velna sat beside him. They looked at the cart together. Dust-covered, worn, but still whole. Taren turned to Velna. We did it. Velna gave a small smile. Yes, together. A worker nearby came over. Do you need help unloading? Taryn shook his head. Not yet. First, we rest. Velma leaned back against the wall, her eyes half closed. The journey was over, but something had started. People began to whisper. They spoke of the human and the chiral who crossed the plains. Word spread fast in places like this, but Taryn didn't care about that. He looked at Velna and said, thank you for everything. She looked at him. You would have done the same. He nodded. I will, from now on. As the sun lowered behind the wall and the outpost lights flickered on, they sat together in silence. No longer just strangers on a road, no longer just a traveler and a guide. There was something more. And their story had just begun. Taryn stood in the workshop, watching the new crystal core being fitted into the engine of his cargo hauler. Sparks flew gently as the mechanic tightened the bolts. The machine hummed again after many quiet days. It was alive. But Taryn's mind was not only on the engine. Behind him, the doors of the outpost opened. Traders moved in and out, carrying crates, talking, and laughing. The market buzzed with life. It had been 4 days since he and Velna arrived, and their story had already spread through every corner of the outpost. Some people pointed and whispered when they passed. Others simply watched them with curiosity. Few dared to ask questions, but all seemed to carry the same look in their eyes: respect. Taryn walked out of the workshop and found Velna sitting near the edge of the market. She was watching the small children play with a spinning toy. Her eyes were calm, but there was something thoughtful in her expression. He sat beside her. Engines fixed, he said. She nodded slowly. You will leave soon. Taryn looked at her, not without asking something first. Velna turned to him. Listening, I want you to come with me, Taryn said, not just as a helper, as a partner. Velna blinked. Why? Taryn leaned back and looked up at the sky. Because we made it through something hard together. Because you didn't walk in front of me or behind me. You walked beside me. And because I don't think either of us needs to walk alone anymore. Velna stayed quiet for a moment. Then she spoke. In my clan, stories are passed through the fire circle. They say the first chiral who crossed a desert walked alone and never returned, but the second walked with a stranger. And they built a home together where the sand ends. Taryn smiled. That sounds like a good story. It is an old one, she said. Taren looked at her again. Maybe it's time we write a new one. That afternoon, they returned to the ship together. The hull was small, but strong. The new core glowed with soft light inside the engine. The cracked cart had been repaired by a kind builder who refused payment. A gift, he said, for the journey you made. Velna climbed into the hauler's side seat. Her claws tapped lightly on the controls. Taryn watched her with a half smile. You learn fast, he said. I watch, she replied. The ship rose into the sky slowly. The outpost shrank below them, becoming part of the dusty land once more. Velna looked down at the long trail they had crossed. Her own footprints were still there, mixed with his. Where will we go? She asked. Wherever people are in need, Taryn answered. Places machines can't always reach. Places where walking still matters. Velna looked ahead, toward The stars. Then let's walk far. The stars blinked like gentle eyes above them. Terran steered the hauler forward, and they entered the open skies once more. Weeks passed. On a planet called Velis, they helped an old miner carry supplies through flooded caves. Terran used climbing gear while Velna swam through the cold water to reach lost equipment on Tora Prime. They delivered medicine to a floating village stuck between mountain winds. Velna's strong arms helped guide the ship through the storm, and her howl helped signal their arrival to the villagers at every stop. People asked the same thing. How did a human and a chiral become a team? And Terran always said the same words. She pulled the cart when my engine died, and I walked beside her when her strength faded. That's how. Their tales spread far beyond the outpost. Traders rattled it at camps. Mechanics carved it into the sides of space docks. Children on distant colonies acted it out in games. The story of the girl with fur who pulled a broken cart and the human who never left her side became a new kind of legend. One night, near the edge of a quiet moon, Terran and Velna sat near a small fire outside their hauler. They had just finished another delivery. The stars above were clear, and the sky held no storms. Terran looked at the flame. Do you miss your clan? Velna nodded. Sometimes, but stories travel faster than feet. They will hear mine one day. Maybe we can visit them, Terran said. Maybe, she answered. There was silence between them, not heavy, just peaceful. Then, Velna turned to him. Do you miss walking? Terran laughed softly. After all that pulling? Not really. Velna gave a quiet smile. But you would do it again. He looked at her and nodded. Always. They sat beside the fire, to shapes in the night, their shadows long and calm. And somewhere far away, a traveler told their story once more. A story not of war or conquest, not of machines or great powers, but of footsteps on dry land, of sweat and dust, of a cart and the ones who pulled it. And in every telling, one truth stayed the same. When strength fails, heart continues the journey. And when two beings from different worlds walk the same path, the road becomes history.